Good evening, Bahamas. You're tuned into MB12 Weekend, broadcasting from Cable 12 Studios on Robinson Road. Coming up tonight in news, the F&M says Michael MP V. Alfred Gray must resign or be fired. The immigration minister says a group of Bahamians embarrassed the country at a recent OAS hearing in Washington, D.C. This as interdiction efforts increase. Plus, a look at the most interesting clips of the week in news. I'm Paige McCartney. We've got those stories and more straight ahead on MB12 Weekend. Welcome once again to MB12. Free National Movement leader Dr. Hubert Minnis is calling for Agriculture Minister and Michael MP V. Alfred Gray to resign following allegations that Gray interfered with the course of justice. On Friday, Gray admitted that he told the Mayaguana Island administrator, who was acting in his capacity as a magistrate, that he had the power to grant bail to a man who had already been convicted. That man, who was sentenced to 3 months in prison and was awaiting transport to the capital to serve his time, was subsequently released. At a press conference at F&M headquarters this afternoon, Minnis said under no circumstance should the minister have called the magistrate to pressure him to release the man whom Gray said was convicted for cursing a police officer. The opposition leader said Gray crossed the line and there's only one way to resolve the matter.
There is only one remedy, short of a criminal prosecution for such an admitted and egregious abuse of power. Mr. Gray must resign from cabinet forthwith or be fired. We call for the immediate resignation of Alfred Gray from cabinet, failing which we call for his immediate dismissal from all public office.
On Friday, Gray denied interfering with the matter and told MB12 that he merely told the island administrator that he had the power to grant bail when an appeal is lodged following a conviction and that he doesn't make decisions for anyone. Minnis said it is extremely sad that Gray sees nothing wrong with his actions and sought to justify it by claiming the man was prosecuted for minor matters and intended to appeal the conviction. He added that the fundamental rule of law is that justice must be done and must also be seen to be done.
The fact is that Minister Gray is not a chief magistrate, a Supreme Court justice, nor is he a justice of appeal in the Court of Appeal. He has no legal authority to interfere in judicial proceedings in any court. Such an act of ministerial interference is an apparent breach of the Constitution and the common law.
The F&M is also demanding that the Attorney General become involved, causing the matter to be immediately and impartially investigated to determine authoritatively whether any law was broken.
The admitted act of the minister sets a dangerous precedent and sends a terrible message locally and internationally that a cabinet minister and member of the executive has the capacity to instruct a member of the judiciary to take or not take a course of action.
And in other news, Foreign Affairs and Immigration Minister Fred Mitchell says those Bahamians who traveled to Washington, D.C. last week to address a hearing at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights are answerable to the Bahamian people. Mitchell held a press conference this afternoon along with Minister of State for Legal Affairs Damian Gomez and other officials to discuss immigration in the country and the aggressive measures government has been taking to stem the illegal activity. The group was led by attorney and activist Fred Smith QC, who alleged in the hearing that the government's new immigration policy is unconstitutional and Haitians' rights have been abused. Mitchell said that group must account to the Bahamian people for their conduct.
These people who went to Washington, Bahamians, making these exaggerated claims about abuse of migrants to this country, must answer the question to the Bahamian public whether or not, and we've said it enough now for me to remove unwittingly whether they are doing so knowing that what they will do is aid and comfort to people who are trying to sabotage this country through a criminal enterprise. They have to answer that question, because their actions are certainly irresponsible. You know, you can disagree with policy. There are domestic remedies for people to take if you have a difficulty with the policy. If there are specific abuses, there are domestic remedies. But to actually go and defame the country in another country, I'm not sure I want to describe that as a particular thing, but I'll just stay my hand for the moment.
Gomez attended that hearing on behalf of the government and condemned what he called outlandish and bizarre allegations. Gomez said there's very little the Bahamas can be forced to do about the accusations.
ICHR does not have the ability or jurisdiction to levy sanctions against us at this stage. We have invited them to visit, to an on-site visit. They have indicated a willingness to accept that invitation and to act on it. And the ball is in their court with respect to indicating to us when they wish to come.
Gomez said, however, that the government will follow whatever requests are made of it.
They've given us some questions at the hearing, which will be answered in the course of things within the next fortnight or so, though we have no deadline within which to give them the answers.
Meantime, the Department of Immigration has intensified interdiction efforts, particularly in the Family Islands. Just yesterday, more than 6 Haitian nationals were apprehended in waters just south of Marsh Harbor on board an American registered vessel. Mitchell provided this update.
They were brought to Nassau that same afternoon and are detained at the detention center. The children are in a safe house, and we expect to repatriate them to Port-au-Prince shortly. So they are now in the custody of the Department of Immigration. We are asking our intelligence people to actively go over the record of this interdiction and some others so that we can be fully briefed on these latest developments. And I hope to be in a position, subject to further advice, to brief the Cabinet on Tuesday and then the House of Assembly on Wednesday.
The apprehensions were part of ongoing exercises on the Family Islands, including Abaco and Eleuthera, where the search for undocumented migrants has intensified. Mitchell said at this stage, human trafficking is on pace to overtake drug trafficking levels in the Bahamas.
There are exercises which are going on in Abaco now, largely based upon the fact that our intelligence tells us that people are using Abaco as a staging ground to take people into the United States, which is an unlawful activity. In addition, it is now a national security problem, because just imagine that in the face of exercises going on with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the police force and immigration in Abaco, people had the temerity to be smuggling people into Abaco in the face of that. So obviously, these are some people who are determined to breach the law.
Mitchell said while there is a humane side to the issue, immigration has become a cold-cut, profitable criminal enterprise and should be treated as such.
What our initial intelligence is telling us is that these folk, whoever the people are that are driving this, their calculation is that by overwhelming us with numbers, they can sabotage any effort to stop this. Now imagine this now. If those 66 people had gotten through, and if the intelligence is correct, that they can pay $5,000 a head for these trips to take place, you see the amount of money that we've actually interrupted. That's what this is, a criminal enterprise which is designed to get money.
And in other news, an outspoken minister of the gospel is calling on the government to form a national commission to help solve the many issues plaguing the country. Bishop Simeon said the behavior displayed in the House of Assembly during national debates is a distraction to real issues. Simeon Davis has the details.
Bishop Hall said he doesn't believe members of Parliament set a good example of how to lead when they go back and forth with one another in the House of Assembly, and it should be unacceptable to Bahamians as well. Hall was referring to a heated debate between Deputy Prime Minister and Montague MP Richard Lightbourne last week, as Lightbourne urged the government to come clean about BAMSI. During the spat, Lightbourne made what some MPs felt was a derogatory comment.
We must learn to talk to each other rather than at each other. And unfortunately, our House of Assembly, our Parliament, does not set a good pace as for national conversation. You heard the other day where one member called the others hogs. When we condescend to that kind of language, then what do we expect the people on the street to do? And so we must be hopeful about ourselves.
He noted that ministers and leaders should learn how to talk to each other and not at each other, stressing that the government should tackle the country's many problems head on. Hall said one of the major issues Bahamians are faced with is value-added tax. He referred to Christie as the Robin Hood of the Bahamas.
At the moment, I would like to recommend to Mr. Christie and his team that he play the role of Robin Hood. And he has to do a better job at causing those who have benefited from this country to pay more. I find it difficult. You remember Robin Hood took from the rich and gave to the poor. I think Mr. Christie needs to take a mask of Robin Hood and the approach. I use that rhetorically.
Hall said politicians are not nationalists. Instead, they are hell-bent. And while calling on the government to form a national commission, he said that no political party can solve the issues in the Bahamas because they all say one thing while in opposition and do another when they are elected as government.
And that's what I find lacking in many of our politicians. They're not nationalistic. They are so doggone hard, hell-bent on one party. And I do not believe that the PLP has all the answers for our country. I do not believe that the Free National Movement or the DNA has all the answers. I believe that there are some persons who have not been elected to Parliament who got good sense and could help us solve some of the problems we face. My point being is that we must look to who's the best, not who's the PLP or the FNM or the this and all that.
Bishop Hall says he is challenging Bahamians to not let up on the government and to hold their feet to the fire because that is the only way there can be a better future for the Bahamas.
I want to encourage our leaders in Parliament and those in the church and wherever you are, that every opportunity to do good should be maximized. We cannot play. We must be honest, we must be forthright, and we must not think about the next election. We should think about our grandchildren and how we're going to make the Bahamas better for them.
Reporting for NB12, I'm Simone Davis.